It's been 2 weeks since this whole thing started. It began with a tanker accident, and it was all over the news. Everyone thought it was just another oil spill. There were plenty of volunteers, kind people wanting to help the poor defenseless animals. Lots of victims. Within hours of the accident, it started happening. The animals had gone crazy. It was scratching and biting cleanup volunteers. People said it was an adverse effect to whatever was in the tanker. Rescue workers were still trying to get the crew out of the ship. They could hear yelling inside, fierce demands to be let out. But that was when it all went to hell, as soon as they cut the door out. There was 6 minutes of broadcast before it went silent. 6 minutes of screaming in agony. The ship crew attacked the rescue workers like rabid baboons. They were breaking bones and tearing flesh. The people on the shore weren't faring any better. Those who had been attacked by animals were attacking everyone else. It was worse than any war zone ever reported. It was sheer brutality, and yet the broadcast went on for 6 whole minutes. Blank faces followed. Nobody could explain what was happening. They tried to continue on with the regular news, the economy, the weather, and a cute human interest story. But they couldn't make us unsee what we saw. I tried to go on with my regular existence, but every time I switched on the news or walked by a newspaper stand, it was there, this big mystery. They had some explanations, bacteria or maybe brain parasites, but it didn't matter. It wasn't the infection we were afraid of. No, it was them. 4 days after the initial report, a state of emergency was raised, and yet, we'd all seen this before. It's in every zombie movie ever. People didn't know who to trust, so were stockpiling food and weapons. Some tried to flee, but it seemed that every zombie movie was right. They didn't make it. 3 days later, they arrived in my town. I expected moans, shuffling corpses, and dismemberment, but that's where the movies lied. They ran through the streets screaming. I remember sprinting to my front door as fast as I could, locking and barricading it, doing anything to make sure it would stay shut. Then I headed for the window. I was on the 2nd story and I could see the carnage. They were unstoppable. They were aware. A group of them had made their way through a building across the street. They jumped straight through the plate of glass windows like they were nothing. The sword slicing through their skin made no difference. They just kept coming. My barricade wasn't going to hold. I rushed around my flat, grabbing supplies and throwing them into the most secure room. I went back for one last look across the street. And boy, I wish I hadn't. In a 2nd story window, my face met with one of theirs. Now they knew where I was. I quickly dashed into my room and locked the door. I didn't have any kind of panic room or a secure basement, so the safest place I could think of was my bathroom. There were no windows and only one door with a lock. I filled my sink and bathtub full of water so I could stay there for a while, and sat in the dark, distant screams in my ears. I began to feel like I may have overreacted. It had been 2 hours with no sign of any zombies. It actually got quieter, and I thought they might have moved on. Maybe I could leave the room and get to the kitchen. I could grab some food to wait this whole thing out. A crash came through the front door. It was the sound of someone running into it at full force, knocking down the barricade I'd put up. There were a couple more crashes before I knew that they were inside. I heard rapid footsteps moving around the flat, more screams, and then a loud bang on the wall beside me. My eyes were open to their widest. Even in the pitch-black darkness, there was another bang, then another. This was the zombie nightmare I had been expecting from the start. I had nowhere to flee. There was only so much time before they would break in. I sat there with my back to the door, hoping my extra weight would make it harder for them to knock it down. But then, it got so much worse.
Why don't you open the door?
There was a voice from outside. No screams or moans, just a quiet, whispery voice. And then there was more of them.
We've come for you. You'll be so much happier if you open the door. It's not so bad.
The whispery voices became a cacophony of noise trying to persuade me, to break me, to fool me. I had heard that the moaning of zombies would drive people insane, but this was worse. A siren call. I sat in the darkness and hoped and prayed that they'd get bored. But the undead don't get bored, and they don't leave. I managed to use the mirror to peek under the door, only to be greeted by horrible, unblinking eyes, blood-smeared faces, screams, and more horrible whispers that was all 2 days ago. I don't know what to do anymore. Maybe it won't be so bad.